Hello everyone, GM. Welcome back to another episode of Overpriced JPEGs, and it is time for our Friday recap. We got a special one today. We are joined by Zeneca for our Moment of Zeneca. Also with us, Gavin Purcell, OPJ producer, team member, partner. And at the end of the show, we are going to be joined by John Rogers, the one and only. You know him, you love him, and he is here to give us the update on Disney, which I don't know, as folks might know by now, killed their next-gen storytelling department. And John has thoughts and insights, and really excited to hear from him. We had released a whole episode about Disney literally the day before they made this announcement. So this is an addendum to that episode. And we will also be publishing a piece by John really breaking this down on Monday's newsletter, Overpriced JPEGs newsletter. So if you are not already subscribed to that, you can use the link below to subscribe and get all sorts of fun insights like the ones we're getting from John. I am coming at y'all from Miami. We have our very first OPJ live tour event tonight. It's going to be so much fun. I am hoping that I will, by the time you're hearing this, some of you will have attended, and it's going to be good. We're going to have a couple surprises, nothing crazy big, but some fun stuff at the show tonight. So that's why I have this new background, though, and this funky headset. I'm recording live from Miami. I am so excited to announce that this year, Overpriced JPEGs has partnered with OPENSEA, the world's leading NFT marketplace, built for everyone, creators, collectors, noobs, and experts alike. I'm an OPENSEA user because they have the best selection of NFTs and a truly inclusive view of the ecosystem, supporting 8 chains and 8 global languages. I trust the systems they've put in place to keep the space safe, like copyright protection, malicious URL detection and removal, robust verification, and more. It's why they are the place to buy, sell, and create NFTs. That's right. You know OPENSEA, you use OPENSEA, but did you know that OPENSEA now has drops? New exclusive projects launch every week from top projects and creators, and you can check them out now using the link in the show notes. They also recently introduced self-serve drops, which is in beta, and allows creators to launch their projects right on OPENSEA. This drops product gives creators access to tools like rich storytelling drop pages, multi-chain support, and drop mechanic customization. The full launch for self-serve drops is coming this spring. So check out the upcoming drops on OPENSEA right now using the link in the show notes and own what moves you. You'll also be supporting the show in the process. Let me introduce you to a brand new company that I could not be more excited about, Web3 Sense. A Web3 analytics platform that combines on-chain data with social media insights to give you the deepest, most meaningful intelligence into any NFT community. I have tested other analytics platforms out there, but Web3 Sense has the most comprehensive capabilities I've seen in the NFT ecosystem. They apply sophisticated data science to wallet histories to determine behavioral patterns and help shape predictive analytics. In other words, they can tell you which Twitter accounts are actually the influencers in your space. And they can tell you what resonates most within a community by looking at what other communities token holders are involved in. The number of use cases here is virtually unlimited. So whether you're a trader, creator, institution, brand, agency, I promise Web3 Sense has data that you want to see with the deep and actionable insights that you need to build, analyze, grow, start, whatever you want to do within the NFT space and in terms of building a business and a community. Now, they are still in very early days, so they're eager to connect with the community. So if you're interested in learning more about what Web3 Sense can do for you and your business, and you should be, go and fill out the very short form linked to in the show notes, and someone from their team will reach out with more information and an opportunity for a product demo. Trust me, you won't regret it. All right, let's just dive in, guys. Let's start where we always start. Vibes check. Zen, how you feeling about the market?
Yeah, honestly, I feel like it's been a while since I've done one of these on the show. It's probably only been a couple of weeks, but I feel like that every time. I know. I mean, the market is bleak and dreary and bleeding and has been for a while. We're in a bear market. We're still in a bear market. The bear market rages on. There's pockets of excitement here and there, but for the most part, I think people are trying to preserve capital, and macro is obviously wild and crazy as well. So yeah, vibes are NFT market, precarious, not great. Crypto seems to be having a bit of like a pep in its step. Obviously, biology's $1 million. I don't think we've chatted about that, but that's a whole thing. But Bitcoin is rallying, so that's something. It
is, and ETH along with it. I mean, not disconnected, right? That you're having a crypto rally and a NFT bear or whatever. It feels like it really, obviously NFTs were having a moment in a big way relative for this market with all the Blur stuff that was going on, and then it feels like the SVB thing really just cut that off at the legs, and then you had the crypto pumping, and then NFTs went quiet. Interestingly, we do have this Nakamigos. Am I pronouncing that right? This Nakamigos project that seems to be like the one. Degens got to find a way to degen somehow. So this Nakamigos project has really taken everyone by surprise and been doing some big volume. Gavin, I know you've been tracking this. Give us the Nakamigos story.
Yeah, well, it's interesting. I wanted to say one thing that's fascinating to me about vibes in this world is that, like, this morning, I was just DMing with somebody about this, is like, I'm starting to feel a little bit better about what's happening. And I don't think it's just Nakamigos, which we'll get into, but like, there's something interesting about these, and both of you know this, obviously we live in this kind of like wavy world of NFTs, right? And like we had this kind of big pump up in January, and then the Blur thing was this very weird NFT pump, but I don't think any of us kind of bought into the idea that this was really NFTs pumping as much as it was like Blur doing something interesting. But now like the thing that Zen mentioned about like crypto pumping, obviously when crypto pumps a lot, NFTs get hurt, right? It's like the classic like ETH go up, NFTs go down sort of situation. But in an ideal world, there's a rotation out of that, obviously, the way that crypto rotation happens, and NFTs are down the road on that a little bit. So the reason why I'm feeling a little bit hopeful today, really today for the first time in a couple of weeks, is that, so let's talk about Nakamigos. So Nakamigos, an interesting project, came out of the kind of the blue. Another really kind of random thing that you kind of don't expect to a pump. In fact, I saw them at 0.01. I was like, oh, this is interesting. And I passed up on it. I didn't buy them. I had them in my Blur sweeping menu to go get some. And what happened is, I think kind of like what happened with Owls like a couple weeks ago, is that when the entire kind of community rallies around one thing, you really can see something kind of like hockey stick up, right? And I think in a lot of ways, what's interesting, even like, Moon Overlord, who's traditionally like a crypto Twitter guy, bought a bunch of these pretty early on. And so like you could tell like the entire community was around it. The thing that I want to talk about briefly with Nakamigos, which I've said, I think on this podcast before, is stealth mints are really interesting in this space, right? And when I say that, I mean that I think unlike almost any other place in the entire world, in terms of product, it's very interesting to do a stealth mint, because if you do a stealth mint and it's not a rug, which is that's number one rule, it can't be a rug, but you can have some sort of proof that it isn't. There's this kind of interesting way that we all pass information around in this space and how tight it becomes. And I think if you find a project that people like, you see that it has like decent art. I think Nakamigos' art is actually surprisingly good for what it is. It's very simple, but it's interesting. And I think one of the other weird things, I kind of faded Nakamigos in the beginning, but I think what's interesting is there's 20,000 of them. And one of the other things about this is where there's that many of one project, and they're cheap, especially in the beginning, it tends to trend quite a bit, right? And I think when you have a project that trends a lot, it ends up doing pretty well, at least in the beginning, because it gets people's attention, keeps them around. So
attention economy.
Yeah, and it's 100%. And by the way, that is a huge part of NFTs. I think it's an underestimated part of NFTs that people don't think enough about, is how much of that is driven by are people paying attention to like right now. So anyway, I think it's pretty cool.
So you're saying the big volume helped them get attention because there were just more people involved in it because of the big mint size?
I think so. And it's hard to say, because a lot of, the traditional market would say like, 20,000 mints is insane, right? Like you think about that. But the same thing happened with Owls, right? Owls had 10,000, and I don't think anybody expected that to do well. But part of my theory is around that maybe when you have more of a project, you can actually get interesting volume on it because there's more.
Yeah, we've seen this. It's like been Owls, ASCII Owls. Are they just Owls or ASCII Owls?
Well, I think it's Owls WTF is the name of the project, but they're made of ASCII, right? Yeah.
ASCIIs. Yeah. Okay. And then whatever that Gitcoin Presents that Maki Big Brother got just totally wrecked on. Not that I think there's nothing that he hasn't gotten wrecked on at this point. I don't know what that man's up to, but
did you see
it's a man, right? No, what was it?
Yesterday, the day before, Blur announced that I think we were planning on ending the season 2 rewards end of March,
and now it's going to get extended.
And then he just tweets, "Fuck," and it was like 10 minutes, and I was just like, I didn't engage with any of that, but I just liked his tweet because I was like,
that's funny. Well, that is like, I've heard people speculating all sorts of things of like, is this really about airdrop farm? Like, my God, how good this airdrop is going to have to be for this person to come out in the green here. Like, it's like, are you really tax loss harvesting? Are you trying to get attention for other things you're going to drop later? Like, who's the guy? I'm going to totally not even remember his name, but some guy who does all these crazy big sales where he obviously loses money or, big buys and he loses money, but it's to get attention for his project and company and whatever else he's doing. It was the guy who bought the $69 million Beeple.
Oh, I think I know you. He's
whatever.
Yes, I know you're talking. He's a
punk. He'll like do this a bunch, and he'll like make these big splashy purchases when he's trying to pump something else of his, whatever, or raise money or whatever he's trying to do. So I don't know if Maki's doing that or if he genuinely is just trying to airdrop farm. But he's like down 4,600 ETH. I don't really know how you come out of that hole.
I mean, Maki is like, I don't know if you guys followed this, but there's some definitely like, you can go deep and understand Maki has got some funky stuff in his background, some funky, real funky stuff. And a couple more threads came out yesterday. So like, I don't necessarily think he's the best actor in the space. And I think one of the things, Zeneca, that we've talked about here, I think you've talked about too, is the interesting about the NFT space is like, who's the market makers for it, right? And like, really, Maki is a market maker for the NFT space, which is kind of scary in some ways, right? When you think about like his background.
It's very scary.
Yeah.
I mean, welcome to all of crypto, I feel like. The deeper we've dug, I mean, we're going to talk about the CFTC stuff, Binance stuff, but it's like you read some of what the CFTC is alleging and you're reading these group chats from, CZ and you're like, I mean, yeah, seems like they're kind of guilty. Like, you dig enough in this space and everybody's, it seems like, has something. Sorry, Zen, what were you going to say?
No, I was just going to agree with Gavin. There was like a thread of, I don't know if it was Zach XBT or someone else did like one of those threads on Maki Big Brother, and like they found like 10 projects he rugged or like that, basically that kind of thing. And it's
classic.
Yeah.
Okay, well, just to wrap up this Nakamigos conversation, part of this was fueled by rumors that it was Larva Labs, which I feel like is just hilarious. It like throws me back to the early days. Like early days, it was always like Yuga or Larva is secretly behind this project. And now we're back with people pumping projects on that basis.
Yeah, I mean, I think everybody is trying to chase that Goblin Town run, right? Which was like really remarkable and mostly driven, I think, still by the fact that people thought it was Yuga. Also, somebody else, yours truly, thought it was Mike Judge for a while. So I might have like contributed to that in part. In fact, I was the one who started that rumor, which I didn't even realize till later. One of the Goblin Town team members is a friend of mine now, and she was like, did you know that you were the person who started that? And I was like, oh my God, I'm so sorry.
Oh, don't apologize. I think they loved that.
Probably,
I think Truth Labs like rode the high of the speculation. Again, it's attention. They got a ton of attention, and then it became a big reveal when it was them. Okay, let's talk about some of this regulatory stuff. There's a lot on the regulatory side to go through here. I mean, just starting with this CFTC suing Binance and CZ personally. Are they suing CZ personally or just Binance? I think just Binance.
I had this exact same conversation. I couldn't remember earlier today. I think it's both of them, but might just be Binance. But I think they're like definitely explicitly call him out, whether it's his role at Binance or he and Binance. But yeah, he's very much obviously intertwined with the whole thing.
What's so interesting to me about this is it's this continuation of this turf war that I feel like we were talking about. I remember talking about this turf war between the CFTC and the SEC a few months ago, or I have no idea of time on this space. Probably know it was last year. But I remember that being sort of a big talking point around the regulatory stuff. And then it sort of all felt like it really just went in the direction of all the focus on the SEC. But we're sort of back now to this very strange tension in the U.S. regulatory landscape that's like, who is in charge of tokens in particular, more so than even NFTs? Like, who is the regulatory body that's supposed to govern this? And you have this really weird dynamic. We have the SEC issuing a Wells notice to Coinbase, seeming to allege that like their tokens are unregistered securities. And then in the meantime, you now have the CFTC going after Binance for some of their, I guess they're really focused on like the futures and options trading stuff. But it's creates just more of this lack of regulatory clarity that I think is really hard for companies and projects to know how to navigate. And at this point feels like it must be intentional on the part of US regulators. Is like, if you keep things, like it's almost a faster way to, or a more interesting way to kill crypto is just to keep things really, really gray so that new actors don't want to enter. If you just keep everything obfuscated.
You know what I'm reminded of? Something that you yourself, Carly, say a bunch. It's like, are you stupid or are you evil? It's like, it's probably not stupid, so they're probably intentionally obfuscating. It's really just, CFTC said ETH, Bitcoin, and Litecoin are commodities, and then Gary Gensler has come out and said ETH might be a security and all this other stuff, and who knows? I think when the Wells notice was given to Coinbase wrote a great thread, or a couple of great threads, and they were like, we welcome this because we want to go to court, we want to prove our case and get some clarity. So I think, and it was great. The entire freaking community rallied behind them because why the hell wouldn't you? And I'm excited for that. I'm excited to see it go to court and get some clarity. I think everyone is. I'm
nervous and excited because there's so much on the line with it if you're US based, but that's also true. Globally, of course. Yeah. And it just, the momentum feels so not in our direction. And yet I'm so confident that that we're right, and Coinbase has done everything as much as they possibly can by the book. I mean, my God, they had to get SEC. Coinbase as a company is regulated by the SEC in some capacity, right? So because it's a publicly traded company that has shares that are securities. So it's so hard to imagine that anybody, any honest judge, can look at this and say we're gonna have to put the genie totally back in the bottle, and all of this is illegal, and but.
Zen, I have a question. I have a question for you as somebody that's from outside of the U.S. and also lives outside of the U.S. When you look at this internationally, how do you think the rest of the world sees this in the kind of turmoil that's going on in the U.S. around this?
A couple of ways. I think first, it seems very ridiculous from the outside. It's all right, the rest of the world seems to be sensible and reasonable, and we may not agree, but it's just it's just weird to see how the U.S. and this actually reminds me, I used to be a professional poker player before, and back in 2011, the US government came out with this law that basically made it illegal to play online poker in America, and all the other countries were still allowing it. And then, there were so many better ways that they could have done it. They could have taxed it, regulated it, but they just, anyway. And it's just so that's, I think, one thing. It's just there's a lot of confusion, and it's just a bit perplexed at how stifling or whatever the US government seems to be, especially, And then the other thought is, obviously the US is, of any country in the world, the largest market when it comes to many, many, many things, but crypto money being pushed around and buyers and participants. And obviously, I think the rest of the world combined is obviously more than the US, but if you pick a single country, US is almost certainly the largest. And so there is that fear, and, if the US decides to really cramp down and eliminates all on-ramps and off-ramps for US citizens, and now this whole new VPN thing, and they crack down on that, all right, that is going to have a very significant negative impact on crypto.
The US has the most to lose with crypto succeeding, because if you buy, which I think everybody does, that there is some level, and the level of it can be debated, but that this is some level of a new world order, right? If crypto succeeds, who loses the most? The current hegemony, right?
And
the
also
power. So it's the US.
There's that conversation around I can never pronounce this right, but the Chinese RMB, the yuan, I think yuan, right, becoming a larger part of the global currency conversation, and that's a big deal, right? If the dollar is that's a very large deal.
I talked about that with Ray Chan a little bit, because he's obviously based in Hong Kong in the recent episode we did with him. And I mean, he said, he really doesn't think that anybody can really challenge the dollar in fiat world. You can make some inroads, but the dollar just has so much, just so much entrenchment there. But that's where crypto is really the biggest threat to it in some ways. You mentioned, Zeneca, this VPN thing. So let's just quickly run through this in terms of what the CFTC is saying about the Binance situation, which is a couple things. One, and in some ways the primary thing that I've been seeing, is that Binance was basically actively encouraging or tacitly encouraging U.S. citizens to go around U.S. laws by using VPNs to trade on Binance and to trade Bitcoin futures and other things. And so, and they did apparently have a VPN guide, a guide on how to use VPN on the Binance website. And
that's pretty.
And they have all these group chat messages of them, effectively admitting that this was a business strategy, which no shit, but it's not great to have that in writing in a court case like this.
Who's the whistleblower in the group chat? That's what I want to know. Somebody out there is screenshotting stuff and sending it in.
these messages were on Signal, which is, and which is encrypted, and they had them set to auto delete, and they still have these messages. So there has to be a whistleblower there. I mean, when I worked in politics, everybody in politics uses Signal because you're always afraid of this stuff, and it's you don't think you're going to get caught with any of this. I mean, some of these group chats, the group chats were not FTX level. They weren't called wire fraud. They didn't have any group chats team literally titled wire fraud. Was
that really one of the FTX
real
things? Oh my God.
Yes. They literally had, I mean, unless this is just like a meme that is, not a meme, but like a lie that has proliferated so legitimately. But they had a group chat that was literally titled wire fraud.
That's amazing.
I just, it's kind of mind blowing. But it was also pretty bad. Let me find this quote that I thought was hilarious.
By the way, side note, don't ever write anything you don't want somebody else to see. Not that I'm not suggesting anybody do anything wrong, but that is
of course.
As an old person in this space, I've learned enough throughout watching other people, not making mistakes myself, thankfully, but just don't write stuff. Don't write stuff down.
Somebody writes in the group chat in all capital letters, I has, with a Z, like H-A-Z, I has no confidence in our geofencing. And by the way, this is the person with the title Money Laundering Reporting. And they wrote in all caps in a group chat, I has no confidence in our geofencing. Like, this entire industry is run by children, like by just... I don't know. I'm assuming this person is 25 years old and has the title Money Laundering Reporting Officer. Anyways, it's just, you have to laugh. It's such a comedy. And so anyways, they're probably guilty. I imagine they'll lose in court. Unlike some of these, I don't know exactly what if it's fines or what they're sort of up to lose. But feels kind of hard to argue that they weren't tacitly encouraging U.S. people to trade. So that's then a couple other quick regulatory hits, and then there's other stuff we want to talk about. These celebrities getting, or Justin Sun is being fined along with like Jake Paul and Lindsay Lohan, more just celebrities who pushed coins without. Mm-hmm. And this is interesting because everyone's reporting that it was they're being fined because they pushed these coins without disclosing that they were paid for them. But I'm wondering if it's more like the Kim Kardashian situation where they just didn't disclose, they didn't do any like additional disclosures around it being a security, which was the whole Kim K thing, was she actually said this was an ad, but the SEC came after her because they were like, well, it's a security and you didn't follow these other security rules. You had tweeted about that, Zeneca. I think you were the one who like alerted me to that. So I don't know what the situation is.
If I can remember correctly, the way that Kim did it, it was like, it was okay for one government organization, but not for like the SEC. And the SEC has these extra rules where if you're going to publicly promote or shill security, you have to like make it very clear and obvious and mention X, Y, and Z. And she just had like hashtag ad, and like that was not obvious or clear enough by their whatever. And so that's probably a similar instance. Well, I mean, all these people being charged or whatever, some of them surely didn't disclose. Some of them would have said, yeah, this is, it's a paid ad or sponsor, but it's probably not enough.
Yeah.
I think
it's the who's who of people who don't surprise you for getting in trouble for this. It's Jake Paul, like Lindsay Lohan, even Justin Sun, Soulja Boy. Like, you're like, oh, shocking. These people didn't follow SEC like crypto reporting regulations to the T or whatever.
I was going to say, I think one thing about this which is interesting is I think a lot of these stories, and let's call them like, they are lawsuits or whatever they are, is about bringing these people's names into public. Because I think what it is little bit, going back to what we were talking about before, is like public shaming and saying to other celebrities, this is not okay, right? Which means a little bit of the idea of like, hey, we want you to know that this is an illegal world that you're playing in and don't mess around in it. And that's like, again, one of those things that's like, okay, well, what are the different pathways people are taking to try to kind of pull crypto back a little bit?
It's to warn off other consumers who will see these headlines more than they'll see any of the other stuff about crypto. It's a good point. One of my favorite tweets of all time is still David Hoffman after the app. So they fined Kim Kardashian like 2 weeks before the FTX collapse happened. And when FTX happened, David Hoffman tweeted, he was like, oh, thank God Gary protected us from checks notes, Kim Kardashian. It's like all of crypto is imploding. But, Kim had to pay $200,000, a full 0.0002% of her net worth. Okay, final thing on this regulatory stuff. The Ripple verdict is apparently imminent. a lawyer involved in the case is saying they were expecting a verdict maybe this week. We're recording this on Thursday. Unless it comes tomorrow as this airs, probably not happening this week, but it should be soon. So that'll be really interesting. And Ripple, XRP or whatever, has been pumping a bit on the expectation that it'll be good news for Ripple. Somebody made an interesting point that there's a lot if they rule against XRP will just appeal the decision. And so in some ways, the downside is sort of limited there. I'm sure the token will drop in price a bit, but it's sort of status quo. But if they rule in XRP's favor, it's going to pump, it'll rip. So there's sort of interesting, maybe asymmetric odds here to play where there's a lot more upside than there is downside in this one argument, which I think I kind of buy. I don't own any XRP and don't plan to buy XRP, but kind of interesting. Let's talk about this Ticketmaster Avenged Sevenfold thing and some of the Yuga stuff that's going on. Zeneca, how much have you been following this Ticketmaster, Avenged Sevenfold, Matt Sanders stuff?
A good amount. I'm a huge fan. This is amazing to me. I think everyone should be talking about this. Is big news. This is it. This is a real world use case in live action with Ticketmaster. Yeah, it's amazing.
The biggest player in the ticket space too. That's the other thing, right? It's not only is it a real use case, it's with the largest player in their size.
Yeah. To give folks context in case they haven't been following, so Matt Sanders, who goes by M Shadows, who's the front man of the metal band Avenged Sevenfold, he actually was on the podcast over a year ago at this point, but you can go check out that old episode because I think it still holds up. He's fantastic. So Matt Sanders has been in crypto for a long time. He's a genuine NFT enthusiast. He's just an emerging tech kind of guy and junkie, and he's super sharp. And so they launched the Death Bats Club. Avenged Sevenfold launched Death Bats Club beginning of last year, I guess, or maybe even end of 21. And that was always about building a tokenized fan club and giving perks to their biggest Avenged Sevenfold fans. They had all sorts of different, really interesting, you can imagine, kind of perks that they were offering, almost Gary Vee style, right? Some of it would be behind the scenes access to the band members or a guitar lesson with their guitarist. I think it was stuff along those lines. And so this is just another incarnation of what they're trying to do there, which is basically now you can go through through Ticketmaster. And if you have a Death Bats token, you can reserve your tickets to an Avenged Sevenfold show early. So you don't have to wait in line. You're not competing with all of the other hordes of people who are trying to get tickets. Lord knows that, Gavin's throwing up prayer hands about this because obviously the Taylor Swift thing really put this front and center. But anybody who's wanted to go to a popular concert knows how this goes. It's a nightmare and it's disorganized and the prices surge and it's all so shitty. So if you're a big Avenged Sevenfold fan and you own a Death Bats Club NFT, you now go, token gate, go into a Ticketmaster site, you say which tickets you want for which show, what your preferences are, and there's some window of time, 48 hours, whatever it is, for you to go in and do this. And when that registration window, when time closes, or during that, you'll get an email confirming your registration. And then when that window closes, you'll automatically be charged for whatever tickets preferences you put in for. And you can front run everybody else who wants tickets, which, to your point, Zeneca, this is it. This is the whole thing. And I think what's interesting is I don't expect this to change anything overnight, but I think we'll look back in 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, whatever the time frame is, and be oh my gosh, this was such a seminal moment, because there is no question that more artists over time are going to do this until this becomes probably the dominant way for tickets to happen. And it's just, you can't do this with email in the same way. This is something that is uniquely doable and doable better and more efficiently because of the blockchain. And just so much credit to Matt and the whole Avenged Sevenfold and Death Bats team for pulling this off.
Yeah, I think it's amazing. And I think another part of it is, I've always thought, I might have even said this a year ago on the show, is one of the best use cases to me of NFTs is as POAPs. If people go to a concert, like Taylor Swift, and then they can give out and then all right, anyone who's been to 10 of Taylor Swift's concerts, all right, you're first in line, and so on, so et cetera. And I think that this is just a great evolution.
So you know what? I'll announce this now, because why not? Because this episode will air tomorrow after the event. Anyways, we're doing this where any OPJ NFT holder is going to get some discounts for Empathy Wines, who's one of the sponsors, the beverage sponsors for the tour. So you're going to get some discount on any Empathy Wine purchase, just if you have the OPJ NFT. But anybody who comes to the Miami event tonight will log in, we'll get a POAP, and then anybody anybody with the POAP, we're going to do a raffle, and 3 POAP holders will get 3 cases of V Friends red wine. And so that's a way to like extra reward the people who came to the event, not just had the OPJ NFT, but like were actually there. It's just, there's so many fun things you can do and start to play with this tech once you actually have it. I mean, you know, it's interesting too. I think Matt put out a tweet like asking his audience, like if there was a way to fix this problem of tickets being a pain in the ass and bots and you not being able to get one and all these things, but you had to download a digital wallet, would you do it? And you know, and they've got millions of followers. I mean, they have a huge audience that's so outside of just crypto. And 37% said no, which in some ways, like 63% said yes, which I think is great.
Good. We're in a good place.
But the comments were that definitely there are people who are just so ideologically opposed to this technology. And you see it in the comments of people just being like, I would never touch that. There's a 0% chance, like, fuck crypto, you know? And you're like, oh my God.
But my thing is wait until they see people who do get the option to do this. Well, another thing I want to say about this, which is interesting to me, is this is what, again, it's the holy grail we've been talking about forever, but also like imagine this on any product that has a hype or a wait list, right? Like I think about this, like tickets are the first place, but obviously those of us who have been in the sneaker world, who have tried to get like cool Nike drops, like this is the next thing for them. Or imagine a world where it's the iPhone, right? Like if you could create a world around things where a true membership club that gives you true benefits based on the fact that you own something and you can continually own it, like the value to businesses in that is so large. And then the value to the consumer is so large, right? Like that's where like if this, going back to the narrative of like why people hate this stuff, like we have to find a way to tell people this is the narrative, right? Like this is the forward narrative going out.
You know, last thing, that this is a story we probably won't get to on today's episode, but you have the newest round of artists for the Reddit avatars were recently announced. Nyan Cat is one of them. And it's so interesting, and Giancarlo did a great thread about this, of like you have millions of people now, right, who have wallets through Reddit, who have minted a first NFT or an avatar, a Reddit avatar. But there's basically no secondary volume because the leap from minting it directly on Reddit and having it in your Reddit vault where you're spending your time and then download a crypto wallet, like go to Meta, like all the steps that follow from that to be able to like trade it on an OpenSea on Polygon are a nightmare. And what it really, I actually think it's such a bullish signal because what it is, like people want digital goods. We all know this. They want these digital collectible things. They like that. The tech is just not user-friendly enough. It's just a nightmare. And that to me is solvable. And so that's some of this stuff with the Avenged Sevenfold thing too. I'm like, the truth is like the tech just isn't quite there for a lot of people to experience this stuff, but that will be solved. And we're starting to see interesting solves with that.
We're so close as well. ERC 4337, a month or so or whatever ago came out. That is the solve. It'll allow people to just have biometrics on their phone, log in, and with a Google account, bam, they have a wallet that is on. Yeah, it's just like it's amazing.
I know that Zen has been following this too, but like the AI world is so interesting to me because what we talked about this a little bit, but like the machine learning world was in the works for 12, 15 years, right? Like that's a long time ago. And just now in November of last year when ChatGPT came out, the world understands it, right? So I think we're in a similar place. We talk about the bear market for blockchain, but we're in a similar place, right? Where like there's this really fascinating tech and these really cool use cases, but nobody could really figure out how to mainstream it yet. That will come. It's like, this is like the trough of disillusionment. That's like we're in the middle of a little bit right now. We're lucky enough to still be here thinking about it. But like, that's how tech cycles work, right? And I think this what is it, 477? What is it again?
4337.
4337 is like, that's the step, right? That gets us to the next place.
Y'all know I love Ledger, the world leader in critical digital asset security. When you own crypto, what you actually own is a private key that gives you access to your coins. It is imperative that you keep this key safe, and Ledger wallets are the best way to do that. The Nano S Plus and Nano X Ledger wallets, paired with the Ledger Live app, give you the best way to start your crypto journey while maintaining full control over your digital assets. Send and sign your NFT transactions with full transparency in the Ledger Live app. what you see is what you sign. And y'all have heard me talk about Ledger Stacks before. Well, due to unprecedented demand, Ledger has received all the Ledger Stacks pre-orders that it can fulfill through summer 2023. And so they have decided to pause the pre-orders. Ledger is incredibly grateful for the community's support and is working hard to get current pre-orders out and ready to ship so that they can make even more Ledger Stacks to keep your digital assets secure. Sign up for the Ledger Stacks waitlist and be the first to know when Ledger Stacks are available again for pre-orders. But don't leave your digital assets susceptible to breach or hack in the meantime. Order your Nano S Plus or Nano X today by visiting shop.ledger.com or clicking the link in the show notes. John Rogers just joined us here. Hello, John.
Hi, everyone.
I wanted to actually segue what you were just saying there, Gavin, with the long build times, and we're just at the beginning stuff, to quickly just talk about Yuga and then end with the next gen storytelling at Disney. It's funny because I think there's a lot of bullish news out of Yuga this week, so I'm leading this in with something negative, which is silly because there's so much bullish news out of Yuga. But you're talking about these long build times for things, Gavin. And one thing that was interesting coming out of this, Yuga had its second Otherside trip recently. And, I just lost connection with but you guys can still hear me, right?
Yep.
Okay. So they just had their second trip, and much like the first one, I think most people came out of it feeling really positive. You had 7,000 users concurrently in the game. You had the competition element, really fun, interesting stuff. They've airdropped these winged helmets to the winners. I don't know what they're going for at this point. I'm sure those will also be hugely valuable assets or whatever. But there was a bit of a skeptical thread that came out from somebody who I thought was pretty sound-minded. They didn't seem like they were a fudder or looking to engagement farm. That was like, I'm kind of not impressed because we didn't really see a big leap from Otherside trip number 1 to Otherside trip number 2. Not a big leap. There was sort of no leap in the tech. And this ties to the point you were making, Gavin, about long lead times, because I thought the most indicting comment he had was, Improbable, which is building the Otherside metaverse technology, has been building this for 12 years. So while Yuga has only been around for 2 and things do take a long time to develop, Improbable's been working on this technology for 12 years. I'm curious your guys' thoughts, and John, this might be something that you could also chime in on, of are you worried at all that there wasn't more of maybe an improved experience from trip 1 to trip 2, and that this tech has been in the works for so long and maybe has been in a stagnant place for a little while?
Well, I'll start. I mean, I think I've been in both trips. I was in them and watched them, and I have to say, the thing that continually impresses me about Improbable's tech is how many people can be concurrent in a browser, right? Which that's a really hard thing to.
And that's their thing.
Yes.
And I should say, I had Herman Narula, the CEO, on the podcast, and was incredibly impressed by him. It's been one of my favorite interviews. So, again, I don't want to overemphasize any FUD
of course,
here. I've been very impressed by Yuga, but I do think we'll include the thread below because I do think it was interesting to me. It was an interesting perspective.
The thing I'll say about it, which is interesting, is that from a game perspective, and this is where I think they're getting at, it wasn't the most fascinating thing, right? Because the thing that was the game, quote unquote, of it was collecting these little orbs, and it was really like running around the world, and that was super fun. So I'm going to say something semi-controversial, and I think this is something to think about. I actually think the things that Yuga are doing outside of the Otherside in the game world are way more valuable and way more interesting right now. And I think we have to kind of pay attention to why that is, who they hired to be their CEO, and what his business model is. So Daniel Alegre, who's now the CEO of Yuga, was the COO of Activision. And one thing that people always forget about, a giant part of Activision was King Games. So King Games is a casual game studio that Activision bought. They are famous, I think, mostly for Candy Crush, right? That was their big hit. The thing about King Games, and people don't realize in the video game world, is that a massive, massive portion of revenues comes from casual games, right? And what Yuga has done now twice, really first with Dookie Dash, and now they're releasing a second game that's some sort of 2D game. I can't remember exactly what it is, but it's called The Legend of Mora, I think, and it's going to be involving Otherside collections. They are smartly understanding that the Otherside is, by the way, I think we can all say the Otherside is at least a year out, if not further. I think that's
my gosh, probably more.
Yes, I think it's that big of a project. They're probably planning it for a while, and these little snippets are coming across. But what they're going to do is release these smaller casual games, which can have as large a footprint, if not a better use case for Ape. And that is bridges that will get you across each way. And I think that's something that that's what's impressed me about Yuga. As somebody who has been following Yuga from the beginning, didn't get in it, unfortunately missed the mint, and I came to it too late to kind of get into it. I've continually said, God, these guys can't just keep doing this, can't keep doing this. And honestly, I honestly think that Yuga is one of the only projects that I kind of trust in the space to understand how to go from what is a Web3 centric project to a much more mainstream project, mostly because of this plan that I see unfolding right now.
I think there's an element where one of the hardest parts in Web3 is how do you keep a community happy and engaged on a day-to-day, week-to-week basis when you're trying to build like a bigger long-term initiative. And I think what Yuga's doing is they're giving enough to keep the horde at bay, so to speak. Yeah. You know, so many projects, like you hear complaints about why aren't they communicating more frequently? Why aren't they giving us more frequently? And I think Yuga's trying to solve for that while they're building to some bigger plan. So I think they're doing a good job in that regard.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I agree with both of those points. I was going to mention the 7,000 or how many thousand people in the one, like that to me is the biggest piece. Like it's okay that to me it's like okay that the game is not that much more progressed. It's like the fact that they're still able to do that, I think, is a big deal. An interesting thing that happened sort of I think the same week as the trip is like Fortnite released their whole new world, and like that kind of broke the internet. And it was like it's just the interesting parallels are like, all right, another side you're jumping around collecting, and in Fortnite people are recreating whole new games, and it's like, all right, that's clearly a future of gaming. It's going to be huge, and this is like, I'll be curious to see how the two play out in parallel. But yeah, I think the whole Yuga is I think killing it lately, and I was kind of critical of them last year. I think even on this show, like in 2022, they were pretty quiet. They didn't do much. It was like up there, the liquidity suck of Otherside was just really damaging, and then silence, and then not much, and then this year it's like they've done a lot and continue to keep dropping stuff, and it's like, oh, okay, cool. Like they've been building, and now we're seeing it, and yeah, it's great.
It's just impressive to be able to maintain positive sentiment once you start executing. That's where every other project has seemed to fall down, is like when it's hype, you're fine. So almost when you're not delivering, but people know or expect that you're going to deliver at something at some point, things pump, and that's great. And then when you actually deliver, that's usually, and Yuga has now started delivering, Dookie being the first, I think, most concrete example, and it only made people more bullish, which is really impressive. The only pushback I'm going to give on this 7,000 concurrent users, not because I don't think it's impressive, because it's absolutely impressive, but you had 4,500 concurrent users in the last trip. And when Herman came on the show, which wasn't too long after that first trip, so last year, it's been many, many months, they said that their tech has been ready to have 10,000 concurrent users for a little while. Again, this goes back to the fact that they've been building for 12 years. So none of that is like, it's impressive, but it's not new. This is just to give credence more, and I don't know the name of the guy who did this thread, to his thread, which is like, you're sort of showing off tech that has basically been developed now already by this company for a long time. And what Improbable hasn't been able to do, seemingly, is sort of like productize on top of this tech that they have ready. So anyway, I'm, again, a huge fan of Improbable, huge fan of what Yuga's doing, and I started out a total Yuga skeptic. But I just thought that was an interesting counter perspective. Sorry, Gavin, want to close us out, and then we'll move to next-gen storytelling?
I was just going to say very quickly, to follow up on what Zen said, is that I think I was very bearish on the Otherside mint and how much money they took from the ecosystem, and I think that was a death blow in a lot of ways to NFTs back then. If you remember, I mean, it was really brutal. And then Luna followed after that, so it became like the summer of death. But I think one thing that I think they've learned, because nothing has been a paid mint since then, and I wonder if they're starting to open the idea of like, okay, we've created this ecosystem. We can now drop free mints to people, and we can kind of grow our world larger without having to suck more ETH out of the people that are there. It might be because of their size. Maybe they've got another paid mint plan, but like I do think that's a really smart learning for them, that hopefully they've figured out, okay, our role now in the space is to be a leader, and how can we grow a company that's large rather than try to pull money out of this pretty small pool of money that really does wreck the ecosystem whenever that happens.
Yeah. And sort of to that point, maybe, like, what's interesting about this, what's called Legend of Moira?
Mora, I think it's Legend of Mora, yeah.
Something like that.
Mara, maybe it's Mara, yeah.
Mara, yeah. You're right, it's Mara. Yeah. I'm thinking like Schitt's Creek, Moira. But it involves the codas, which we've known for a while were more valuable and were going to mean something, but it wasn't always clear what. And anybody with an Otherside land piece that has a coda on it can decouple that coda from the piece of land to play this, your point, Gavin, kind of casual game, it seems, which is awesome. And again, creating this value where people were expecting, and in a way that met people's expectations. And maybe there'll be more they'll do with Codas, I'm sure, as part of the other side and everything. But okay. Everyone good for us to move on to the Disney news? Okay. So I mentioned this at the top, but it was hilarious timing for John and I, who, like 2 weeks ago or whatever it was, recorded this whole deep dive episode about Disney and John's thoughts really about what Disney should do when it comes to NFTs and blockchain. Then we published an amazing, well done, John, article laying out this vision in the newsletter. And I think it was literally the day the article came out, or maybe the day after the article came out. Yeah, same day the article came out, and a couple days after we'd released this episode, Disney announced they are shutting down their next-gen storytelling team and, firing, I guess, so laying off almost all of the 50 people who are a part of that team, which I know we'll definitely talk about. 50 people, I know that's a big point of you have a lot of thoughts on that.
Yes,
John.
I do.
So, John, give us the update here. Like, what is your take on what is happening here, why it's happening, and what it means for Disney?
Yes, there's so much to unpack. To begin, the idea of the article that I wrote and what we spoke about in the prior podcast was there's this big idea that Disney needs to think about their efforts as building a theme park on the blockchain. And that doesn't mean a literal theme park. It's more of an organizing principle in two ways. One, a very wide variety of offerings and experiences across multiple, say, genres. So it's not just a metaverse experience. It's also phygital activations. It's also rewards. It's also identity. So in the idea of a theme park having those kinds of offerings it's a mindset that everyone at Disney can get around. And then the second, which is a more literal interpretation of that, is where's the best place to build this team, to build this structure? Because under the theory of architectural innovation, which we've talked about quite a bit, organizations need to fundamentally reorganize around the innovation to take advantage of it. And Disney and no other entity is structured to really absorb it and build. And Disney is actually better positioned than just about anyone else because they have this group in the theme parks division called Walt Disney Imagineering. The Imagineers are the men and women who design the attractions, they develop the experiences, and it's across the board. And it's a team of storytellers, futurists, technologists, and in many cases, all three of those in one person. And so I felt that really being where they were structured as part of the Disney distribution team, which was definitely going to be shut down, was the wrong place. And they should put this team in Imagineering.
So just to be clear, the next-gen storytelling team that was the team that everyone thought of as working on blockchain at Disney was not in the Walt Disney Imagineers. No. They were in the content distribution, you said?
They were in this team that was created by Bob Chapek a few years ago, like 3 or 4 years ago, called DMED, Disney Media and Entertainment Distribution. And essentially it was a team of ex-McKinsey people mostly.
Oh, no, really? Oh, wow.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Lots of ex-McKinsey and a few Bain people in there, too.
Oh, that's even worse.
Yeah. Yeah, angels of death, right? And so what they would do is they would look, oh, hey, we've got this content coming from Walt Disney Studios. We got content coming from Lucasfilm. What's the best place to put it? Those creators, those storytellers in those studios don't get to determine that. This group was despised because you're taking away some of the determination of the filmmaker and the storytellers and saying a McKinsey guy is going to choose that for you. So this group was despised. There was a reason for its existence, but they decided eventually to put next generation storytelling in that group. And the idea of thinking about it from a content publishing perspective, I liked. Like, yes, you're getting in the right mindset that this is storytelling, it's content, and you're publishing. Blockchain is a new medium. The problem is that organization, when Bob Iger came in on day one, announced that he was going to shut that down. So there was always going to be a change. It's just I never suspected that they would just shut the whole thing down. I thought that they would reorganize the team, who I thought would be maybe 5 or 7 people, into Walt Disney Imagineering. What we have learned is that team was actually 50 plus people, mostly coming from a video game background. And they basically skipped over all of the essential steps of strategy, cross-divisional alignment, technical standards, and went right into building a product. And with my Disney experience, I mean, I fought for 1 headcount for years to get 1 or 2 headcount. How do you get 50 in 1 year? The only way to do that is that someone at the CEO level says, make me a product as fast as you can. And I think that's what happened. I think they set up this team of 50 people to make a metaverse game type experience, think like a Fortnite, and they just ran right into building. And what happened was they went down the wrong road. They over-resourced it. They weren't really aligned correctly in the organization. And they had a big target on their back because of a couple of those factors, the alignment and the size, and no real clear roadmap to profitability in, say, a 2-year window. And I think Iger just said, no, we're just going to shut this down. What I hope, and what Matthew Ball has also written in the last 24 hours, is Matthew Ball wrote that they should be in Imagineering. Yes, we were aligned. Great.
Wonder if you watched our podcast episode. You said it first. Let's just be honest.
I would love to say it's a moment of brilliance, but the reality is it's just so clear that no, it's where it has to be. So it's just clear thinking. But he wrote that they should be in Imagineering, that they should be a small team and allow the divisions, the studios, to really oversee the storytelling aspects and the building aspects of these experiences. And so that's exactly what I was thinking, that this should be a 4-person team, maybe 5 at most, focused on strategy, alignment, technical standards. Like, you don't want one team building on Polygon, another team building on ZK Sync, and really kind of look at it from that direction, exactly how franchise development was set up originally. And his hope, and what he wrote and how he finished his article, was he thinks that Iger, he's a little bit more bullish than I am on Iger doing this. He thinks that Iger's doing that. He thinks that this is just clear the table, hit the reset button, and Iger's been positive enough about the space that he's going to start over with Imagineering.
And what is that based on? Was there some news about Imagineering or a restructuring there that led him to that, or was it just total speculation on his part?
Partly. So about 2 weeks ago, maybe 3 weeks ago, they announced there's been some transition in Imagineering. Bob Weiss, longtime legendary Imagineer, head of Imagineering for probably a decade or more, retired. And they brought back Bruce Vaughn, who had been the chief creative officer of Imagineering. And they brought Bruce back to both be the chief creative officer and the co-head of Walt Disney Imagineering. And so what Matthew thinks is that is a real indicator that this was not an accident, that this was by design, that Bob wanted to bring back someone who he had confidence of and has an idea around Imagineering in the parks that he needs Bruce to help oversee. Interesting.
And you're partly less bullish, I'm assuming, on this because you sort of identified digital experiences and gaming in the past as Bob Iger's Achilles heel.
I've said this, and I'm sure this, if he ever saw those, it would irk him to no end. But he is the most successful media executive of the last 30 years. He has earned that. It is absolutely his. That's true. He has 1 week's part in his career that has repeatedly kind of come up every 5 or 7, 10 years, and that's just around digital leadership. He's just never been the digital leader and the leader and successful in that space as he aspires to be. It's a small ding on an amazing career, but clearly blockchain, Web3, metaverse is deep in the digital space.
Yeah, but for our purposes, it's a big ding for us. It's a tiny ding in the context of him.
John, can I ask you a quick question? So, okay, I have somebody who's followed Disney's kind of ventures in video gaming for a while. Like, I know they had brought in Warren Spector, who's a very famous video game designer a long time ago, and unfortunately it didn't work out for those guys. Is there a world where, Bob Iger's been very good at buying and absorbing large IP companies, right? Like, so my question is, when you look at something like what Zen mentioned earlier with Fortnite and how Epic's doing, like, is there a possibility that he's looking at a larger video game acquisition? Like, because to me, that would be something I could see Bob Iger doing going forward to get into this space.
You are leaning into what I've been thinking, and I believe, of course, this is with no inside knowledge, but looking at how the cards are laying on the table right now, what I believe he's trying to do is clean up the balance sheet from the Fox acquisition, address what's going to happen with the future of Hulu and ESPN, which are, big revenue generator at ESPN. Hulu is kind of in this weird spot. He's going to make some moves in that regard. And then what he's going to do with a cleaner balance sheet, I believe, and I would recommend, is look at acquiring EA.
Interesting.
I think it was a mistake to shut down the Disney video game division back 2014 or so. They had a hard time developing games internally, brand standards. The content isn't as broad as for games as you need it to be. But I think it was a mistake to just shut it down. go to straight licensing. I think it'd be better for them to address that they need video gaming as part of the future of Disney. It's grown so much, and it's going to continue to grow, that I think they have to make a deal to acquire a video game entity.
Very interesting. So if I'm taking away from this, let's wrap this up in a nice bow. John, you've been advocating now for a little while, and you advocated recently on this podcast for blockchain efforts at Disney to be a team of, right now it just needs to be 5 people or so living within the Imagineers division, because those are the people who are best equipped to understand this from a technology and storytelling perspective. Think of it like being a theme park. And you described the reasons you were optimistic about the actual blockchain division, to the extent that you want to call it that, living within this content distribution vertical. But also it was part of this Bob Chapek vision where he really saw the blockchain and NFTs as being tied to like Disney Plus only, which you didn't really like. Mm-hmm. And so while this news and this headline is obviously disappointing because they're shutting down, it reads like they're just shutting down their next generation storytelling program. There's a world in which we should actually be optimistic about this, because it probably wasn't the right path and wasn't in the right division to begin with. And so in a best case scenario, they've shut this down and will actually proceed along a better path with all of this in a different way over in Walt Disney Imagineers, knock on wood.
Exactly. For those of us working in this space, the worst thing that could possibly happen is if a Disney-level entity, a Nike, were to come into the space in a big way, completely and totally fail and walk away. It will scare away every other sort of global 1,000 company from working in the space for years. We need these companies to be successful. And I think that Disney, with what we've learned now this last week, was going down the wrong direction. And despite the human cost of these layoffs, which is terrible, it's ultimately the good thing for the space, because it's going to set Disney up to reset and reposition to be successful in the coming years. And the one thing about next generation storytelling, which they were clearly defining more as a metaverse game, this idea of making passive content active, it's not long term. We're going to start hearing the first press releases in the coming days. I've got a wink, wink, nod, nod, a little alpha there. The first press releases with major global named filmmakers attached and will be announced in the coming days. And so these projects are real, and they're coming to market in the next year and a half.
And that was something that you felt like was weird about the was it the Wall Street Journal article, or like one of the stories that came out about Disney shutting down next gen storytelling? There was a quote in there about it being like 10 years away, and you're sitting here being like, I can assure you it's not.
Yeah, exactly. So I think they were saying these kinds of next gen storytelling experiences are 10 years away. It's like no, they're days away, and from announcement, and a year away from release. I think what they were saying is metaverse, like what we think of Ready Player One. Yes, that Ready Player One is a decade or a lot longer than that probably away. But metaverse experiences are certainly here.
Like interactive content where we're going from just like watching something and being an audience member to sort of having stake in something we're watching. Or
exactly. And this comes around ideas around identity, commerce, social, being all built into the content that you watch, so that you can watch a show and click, oh, I just bought that backpack as an NFT, or I just bought that backpack as a real digital a physical good. That's coming very, very soon.
Well, John, thank you so much, as always, for all of your amazing insights and thoughts. And I love the combo of hard facts and then also your interpretation. We will have an awesome piece that you've written, but I know we're waiting. We might wait on a couple more details to come out. We're going to publish it on Monday that lays some of this out and more. And so folks can check that out on the Overpriced JPEG Substack.
Yeah, thanks for having me back.
And we'll be back next month to just do what we do over on Blockbuster. But any final thoughts, words, questions, Zeneca, Gavin, John?
I have a question. It's a little off topic, but it's Disney related, John. I'm really curious to know, in this world where AI is blowing up, people can create content, click of a button, videos, animations, art. What is your insight into like how a company like Disney might approach that? Would they use it as an excuse to lay off people? Are they going to lean into it and really go use AI as a tool, or are they going to I love your thoughts and insight into that.
Yeah, there's a couple. Well, first of all, Disney's been using AI for years in the theme parks with the Walt Disney Imagineering team developing that. So it's already in the company in consumer-facing experiences, primarily in the parks group. They will use it in sort of filmmaking and storytelling applications. Think like development execs in the studio kind of coming up with story ideas. What's going to be interesting this year is there's potentially a writer's strike, a WGA Guild writer's strike coming. And I think one of the main topics of that's going to be how is AI used in the writing process? And it sounds like the most recent news has been the Guild is as long as writers still get their credits and still get their compensation, they're okay with it being as part of that process. So I think it's inevitable. It will be used. It'll be used in production for sure, post-production, editing. It's just a matter of the guilds getting the right agreements in place of saying, okay, we're okay with this, but here's the framework that you have to operate within. But it's definitely coming.
I will say one addition to that, if you haven't seen it, there is an incredible video of this small group of YouTubers that created an anime from scratch in like a week. It is a fascinating thing to see what these AI tools are going to be able to pull off. And I don't think from very far in the future. And it is going to transform, as somebody who comes from the entertainment world myself, and by the way, also is a member of the WGA, right? So I have like this whole conversation in my brain going on about like creator versus technology. The unlocks are going to be massive. I think the thing to think about that's going to Zen, to your point, is where along the pathway will jobs shrink? I think animators is maybe a place that you have to think about, and people who are going into like animation, there is a world going forward, just like there is with programmers, where there may need to be less of them because of what you can do with the scale of what AI is available. And that's just transformative to the world at large, right? Like, and I think that's something that like, I tell my kids are teenagers, and I tell them like, learn as much of this stuff as you can right now, because like that is the transformative thing that's coming, and people's jobs are going to change, and it's pretty crazy to watch.
Yeah, jobs are definitely going to change. And the other thing I would add is there's an interesting perspective. It's kind of a confidential conversation, so I can't relate too much, but some of the folks at Andreessen Horowitz have a perspective on this where Web3 storytelling has an opportunity to be a counterbalance to AI, in that it creates new opportunities for these artists, storytellers to express their art, to work, and creates new job opportunities. It's just some of the structure of how they traditionally operate, how they're traditionally compensated will have to be rethought. But the opportunity to pivot and see new opportunities is there at the table right this moment.
And blockchain gives that ability to have an authorship, right? Sorry, Zen, go ahead.
No, I was going to exactly saying like that. Crypto and AI, I think AI can't exist without crypto, without blockchain, for that provenance, authenticity, and value. So I think Punk 6529 has written a lot about this, spoken a lot about this, and it's just a very clear, like regardless of what happens with jobs and innovations and all that kind of stuff, whatever the content that ends up being produced, I think there will need to be a way to authenticate what is genuine and what is not just, because I don't think we're that far off, probably a few years, if that, where a fan could go and just like plug in, the entire 10 movies or 50 episodes of a show and be like, hey, make me a new one. And then it starts proliferating. And it's like, well, what's the original? What's not? And then you have to be able to prove.
And this is what comes back to this fascinating, rewind a whole year ago, maybe when I was on your show, Zeneca, of talking about this idea of mythology versus lore versus canon, where all of a sudden the definition and the distinction between those words has real meaning and importance. And I just think we're getting to that point right this moment.
Yeah. I mean, that mythology versus lore is always stuck in my head as like one of those things that I constantly think about because it's so perfect.
Well, we could go for another hour, I'm sure, but I am here in Miami and I've only rented the studio for an hour. So I need to wrap us up, and I'm sure we all have things to get on to our day, but we'll obviously be continuing this conversation. We should maybe do a whole blockbuster episode really looking at AI, John, and like how that weaves into all of this. Zeneca will bring you on for it, and Gavin. We'll bring the whole crew back, we'll bring the brand back together, 2.0, really diving into that. Thank you all so much for joining me today, and have an awesome weekend, folks. Thank you so much for watching this episode of Overpriced JPEGs. If you liked this conversation, if you liked this episode, please go ahead and hit subscribe. It helps me out, it helps the show out, and it means you will get alerts and updates when we post new content. Thanks again.